Dr. Jane Ruby, thanks so much for joining us today on the show. Dr. Ruby, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background before we get started.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Beau. I'm actually trained as a medical professional. I'm a licensed nurse practitioner, and I also have a couple of doctoral degrees in research. I'm a health economist in the pharmaceutical industry. I'm published. I've done a lot of research studies. I'm also very politically active here in D.C. I've got a show called Dr. Jane's D.C. Weekly on the Exceptional Conservative Network, and so I'm fairly well connected here in D.C. in politics and healthcare.
And Dr. Ruby, although you look very well today, my understanding is that you did acquire COVID-19. Can you tell us about when that happened, what your symptoms were, and the process of getting healthcare throughout this?
Sure. I began to have very severe flu symptoms around the end of March. And after contacting my primary physician, I was sent for the test. I wasn't sure I really had it because it really felt like a very severe flu. But about 10 days later, it took 10 business days to get the test results. And I was notified that I was positive, which was very frightening because with this illness, you live in fear every moment that you might convert to like a pneumonia or some kind of a respiratory failure. I immediately asked my doctor for the treatment that President Trump has fought so hard to get us, and I was denied. He said that they weren't using it in Virginia. They barely used it for one or two people in an ICU. And when I asked him why he would wait that long or wait till things got that severe, he really didn't have a good answer. And that kind of began a little bit of a research.
Now, we are talking specifically about hydroxychloroquine, correct?
We are.
Okay. In combination with azithromycin too, or just one?
Well, it could have been, they're talked about as a pair. I actually went around the doctor and talked to the nurse practitioner a couple of days later when my high fevers, like 102, were unrelenting. And she consented to give me the azithromycin treatment for 5 days, which had no effect on the symptoms at all. And I didn't think it would because that's an antibacterial. However, it can sometimes calm down a brewing pneumonia. That's
right.
So,
based on this, obviously, you've done some research about what the president had talked about with the effectiveness of hydroxychloroquine. Can you speak a little bit about why you wanted that particular drug? And was it based on things you had seen about recovery of other patients that you had seen or known about?
Yes, and I wanted to prevent going into a respiratory failure, which would have landed me in an ICU on a ventilator. Ventilators are not, I don't know if people understand what they really are, but they're incredibly invasive. It requires a very large tube in your airway down into your lungs, and it force pressures air to try to force oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange. It's very uncomfortable for patients and traumatic, actually. So I was trying to get the medication. I knew I was positive. I did go to the hospital after about 10 days because my fevers would not break. And I got concerned that I was brewing a pneumonia somewhere. So I did get evaluated. It was quite an ordeal. And I had a nurse practitioner to physician chat with the ER doc. And I said to her, I have it. I'm not getting better. Why don't you just take the medication? She parroted, which was really interesting, similar language to my primary physician. And that got me suspicious, Beau. That's when I started to do the background research about getting treatment in Virginia.
Let's talk about that specifically, because there is a Virginia Health Department letter that went out on March 25th. And I just want to cover some of that because this speaks directly to what you're talking about here in the state of Virginia, which could be happening in other states too, probably likely. It talks about having an, quote, inadequate supply of the drug. It says it has a lack of FDA approval, no data from studies. Here are the guidelines. Prescriptions should be restricted in the outpatient setting and require diagnosis, quote, consistent with evidence for its use. Provision number 2, community pharmacists should be use their professional judgment to define whether the prescription is valid and a bona fide practitioner-patient relationship. Number 3, prioritize it to existing treatments, meaning people that are already receiving care for this particular drug. And finally, advise against hoarding and stockpiling. So these are the provisions the Virginia Department of Health has provided to all healthcare professionals. Based on this, Dr. Ruby, it seems that they really don't want a lot of people getting this drug, including you. Talk to us about your medical background on off-label prescriptions and why you think this is happening in the state of Virginia.
Yes, first of all, people need to understand that governors control the treatment you get in your state through the Department of Health. That's why you see those notices in the Department of Health. I want people also to understand that it is not illegal on any level for a physician or nurse practitioner to prescribe off-label, which is defined as for a reason other than which a drug was originally approved. If there's some data, any information, doesn't have to be published or anything, that the drug has some effect, they have the right to do that. Pharmaceutical companies, in contrast, cannot market it off-label. That's illegal. But so with that understanding, what they're doing here is they're saying you can only prescribe it for malaria or lupus, the things that it was originally approved for, when in fact what they're doing, they're using that ostensibly to really block the average person's ability. And it's not just Virginia. If you look at it, if you go to lupus.org and you look at it state by state, they've done a great job of listing. They're unbiased. They're just listing each state's Department of Health directive. Each Democrat state has similar language blocking. If you look at Florida's as an example, which is run by a Republican governor, there's no dictate, no edict to the state pharmacists. It is allowed to be used as doctors see fit. And I know people that are getting it on a daily basis, which prevents them from suffering through the entire. In
your expert opinion, though, as both a medical professional and as someone who's had COVID-19, why would any state governor or Department of Health issue guidelines like this that would prevent people from getting well if they felt that the drug potentially could save a life?
Beau, my personal opinion is that Democrat governors want to prolong the shutdown. It's very, very simple. And the best way they can do that is to prevent people from getting the treatment. I know it sounds diabolical, but if you look at that state by state governance, it is divided right down the line between Democrats and Republicans. Republicans want us to get back as a nation, to work, to get our economy back. It all goes back to that. And I want President Trump to know that all the effort he's made to bring these life-saving treatments to the forefront are being sabotaged by Democrat governors. And it's so easy for them to do.
So let's play devil's advocate for just a moment. Sure. If I'm the Virginia Department of Health or any other Democrat legislature-led state, and I say, yeah, but Dr. Ruby, we don't know what the side effects of this are. We don't know what potential adverse effects there are going to be to this. We're trying to keep your health in mind. And yes, we know there may be anecdotal evidence. We know it's in clinical trials, but we have no direct evidence and the FDA has not approved it. What say you to that?
Actually, that's not correct. I have to correct you. Okay. The FDA came out on March 28th with an edict that they didn't have to do. They wrote an emergency order indicating that they cleared the way for the off-label use across the nation of chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine for COVID-19. They're very specific about that, and I can send you that documentation. They sent that down on March 28th when they saw the majority of Democrat governors sending down these restrictive edicts, blocking access around the 25th to the 27th. Most of those states came out with that during that time period. On the 28th of March, the FDA actually they rarely do that. They don't get involved in off-label use, but they came out and said, this is an emergency order allowing the use of hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine for COVID-19. And Democrat governors have not changed their edicts through their state health departments.
That's exactly where I was going to go with that. So that letter from the Virginia Department of Health was March 25th. You're talking about what the FDA did on the 28th. So apparently there has been no revision in the policy since the 25th while you were sick, while other people have been sick, while the numbers are spiking. Once again, why are Democrat-led states, if indeed this is true, not revising their health standards to allow the prescription of hydroxychloroquine?
They want to prolong the COVID pandemic. They want to prolong the appearance, let me correct myself, of the COVID pandemic. Because the longer, let's face it, the longer they can keep us from coming back to work and hold President Trump back from reopening the country, the worse the economy will be. And they're trying to set it up for November. I don't think they're going to be successful. But my biggest concern is that people are suffering and dying without these medications. And I want to make a note about that article that supposedly came out about the VA study that said hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine used in the VA resulted in more deaths. This is my wheelhouse. That was a retrospective chart evaluation. It was not peer reviewed. It was not published. When things are peer reviewed, you get other scientists to criticize it and sharpen it and make sure that it's on the up and up. None of that happened. And Dr. Birx herself, who I think is somewhat of a globalist, if you want my personal opinion, even she came out with the president last night on her own and debunked that study for its poor methodology, the lack of peer review, and the lack of publication. That study was very flawed and does not represent the other anecdotal, reports from across the country and the world.
But it's being used to legitimize the reduction of the prescription of this potential life-saving drug.
Yes.
So are we in a situation, why are we in a situation, do you think, Dr. Ruby, where the politicization of a potentially life-saving drug is taking precedence over the ability to restore America's health?
Beau, if you could think of a way in January, let's just say, what was President Trump doing? He was having rallies week by week. He was saying, look at your 401. This is the greatest economy in the world, in the history of the world. And he was headed, and I believe he still is, but he was headed for victory in November. If you could come up with a way to stop that was very efficient, that would shut down the American economy, slow down the world economy. What are we getting from this virus? No Trump rallies, people at home, slamming down of the American economy, people getting sick, people dying, committing suicide. I couldn't think of a better tool than what China did by allowing this virus to seed throughout Europe and Asia and then into the United States before they said anything. That's my theory.
And do you think that, frankly, a patient's ability to live or die could be, frankly, contingent upon where they live?
Absolutely, 100%. And I'm putting my money where my mouth is, and I'm in the process of moving. I will have more information on that by the end of the year to a Republican-run state.
Oh, that's okay.
Virginia is dangerous, and so is Michigan, New York, New Jersey. It goes on and on. It's 100% divided on partisan lines.
So the FDA has made an emergency approval of this drug, yet you still have Democrat-led states preventing the prescription of it, or in this case with the state of Virginia, restricted to outpatient setting and required diagnosis, quote, consistent with evidence for its use.
They're restricting
That's what they're using.
In the outpatient setting.
Right.
That means that's why my doctor was a good little soldier and said, I can't prescribe that for you. I went to the hospital in part, not only to make sure I wasn't converting to a respiratory failure, but also because I was told by a lot of high-ranking officials around here in Virginia that if you went to the hospital, they can prescribe it there for you. So I thought, I'm positive. I'll get in there. I'll get evaluated, and I'll get the medication. The discussion I had, and believe me, I know how to navigate my way around a healthcare system. I know the answers when they're bull and when they're not. And I negotiated with that ER doc, and she said use the same language. So they weren't even giving it prescribing it in the hospital. And you have to understand something. The State Department of Health in every state controls medical licensure. So they're holding their medical licenses for the rest of their lives over their heads. If I were them, I'd be frightened to prescribe it as well.
It sounds to me like some of these guidelines are more threats than they are guidelines. Would you say that's accurate?
Oh, 100%.
Because it sounds to me like even if you had been able to successfully get that prescription, you now have the second hurdle of getting past the pharmacist. Correct.
They've really got the access to the treatment locked up. President Trump did everything he could do to get it to the forefront. He must have talked to someone in the FDA, I'm just assuming, or the administration did, to get the FDA to step forward and say, yes, use it. And we have right to try. You don't have to just be a cancer patient for right to try. If I had converted to respiratory failure, I still wouldn't have gotten the drug. You might not be talking to me today if I would even be alive or still on a ventilator. So this is really an emergency. And I want the president to know, and I'm hoping that, that I'm grateful to media outlets like you for getting this story out, because people need to know that they're in danger if they get this illness and it gets worse for them.
And is it true that hydroxychloroquine is very pretty readily and easily accessible and also very cheap to produce?
Yeah, it's all generic. And, I think its safety profile is very well known. When the president says it's really safe, nobody's died from it. If you don't have any other, serious conditions, it's fairly safe to take. It does have a little bit of an effect on what's called the QT interval, which is your cardiac pacing.
Mm-hmm.
But for the majority of people, it's momentary. It's not significant. It's very, very rare. And like I say, the drug's been out for 20, 30 years. And so the safety profile is very well known, which is why the FDA went out on a limb. I've never seen the FDA come out in my lifetime as a health professional with a medical, emergency directive, liberating the use of this treatment.
So if you are a patient who is basically on their deathbed and you're in the state of Virginia or another one of these states that you speak of, and you're begging for this drug, and the medical professionals are telling you, well, we don't really know that it works for this, what does a person do?
I've only heard of 2 people who got the drug, one in Virginia and one in Michigan, but you need to know the situation around it. I was told by a former elected official in Virginia that the person who got it in a Prince William County hospital turned out to be an official at the Department of Homeland Security. The second person in Michigan, which has been shut down by Governor Gretchen Whitmer, she's prevented the use of the drug in her state, was when a Democrat legislator got COVID-19 and begged for the drug and got it. But the average person, the citizenry, I'm warning you, is not going to get this treatment. And I hope we get other treatments that come out. And if those treatments get blocked as well, you'll have an additional proof that my research is coming true.
And by the time things get too hairy, medically speaking, you might not be able to get to another state to have it prescribed, correct?
Correct.
So what in the world do we do as Americans on a grand macrocosmic scale to fight the politicization of a life-saving drug?
I wrote a book called A Sea of New Media, where I tried to educate people that you can make a difference yourself. We can't trust the media. We have to, in numbers, huge numbers, get the word out. We can try to get it to mainstream media that are still friendly, like, I won't name them, but we know who are getting stories out. But that's part of it. We have to get up off the couch. We've been conditioned to stay at home, which actually is a great way to brew illness, to be honest with you. I think we need to bust out. We need to support each other in Operation Gridlock, in challenging our state, leaderships, because mark my words, Beau, the states that will open up first and fully will be Republican-run states, and the states that lag, like Virginia and Michigan and New Jersey and New York, will justify it using COVID, and they will open up last, and their economies are going down, their people are suffering. It's really dangerous.
It's looking like Georgia and Tennessee, my native state of Tennessee, seems to be getting back up and running too. I guess my final question for you would be, how are you feeling now, and how were you able to beat this without the help of hydroxychloroquine?
Well, I was told by my doctor the day he called to give me the positive results that I should tough it out after I asked him for the medication. And tough it out I did. I don't know what people are talking about when they say mild symptoms, but maybe because I didn't convert to pneumonia or respiratory failure. My mild symptoms were 102 fevers for over 20 days, profound weakness, headaches like you've never imagined. I'm not a headache person. I've never had migraines. Body pain, the soreness that you get with a regular flu. These were I lost my sense of taste and smell. I still only have about 5 or 10% of it. I once in a while can smell garlic, just a little bit. This is very dangerous. I have to throw food out every 2 days because I don't know if it's contaminated or spoiled. I have to put a timer on. I almost set my apartment on fire in the early few days because I was trying to make something to eat and I didn't know that I had lost my sense of smell. So you can't smell if something's burning. It's very dangerous. These symptoms I think they're neurological damage. I'm praying that they come back over time. I'm still weak, and it's very difficult. It doesn't just go away like the flu. I'm getting there. I'm getting better, but this has been almost, I think today is day 39, actually.
Wow.
Still fighting
significant
symptoms.
Well, Dr. Ruby, we're praying for your continued path to recovery, and thanks so much for talking with us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, Beau. I appreciate it.
Thanks,
everybody.